welcome Samuel, you're blah, 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 blah. And I say, we're not going to do that. He's seen this look before. He knows he'd done bad.
You're basically delivering almost verbatim the Bible itself.
How do you create a version of Samuel that is human and unique?
The affection that Samuel feels for Saul, which is not an easy affection, but it's all the deeper when he's deeply, deeply invested in Saul. That's the kind of question that we've been exploring. Why is Samuel as revered as he is?
Mother was Catholic and your father Jewish?
Yes.
How did belief emerge for you?
I believe in the ethic of Judaism very, very much. What we would say in New York is, you know, Jews are born guilty. Catholics have to go to school to learn it.
Hey, I'm Jon, creator of House of David. Welcome to Inside the House. It's your ticket inside the show that we are creating. Thank you, first and foremost. You have blown the doors off any expectations that we had for the show. Variety reported that in week one, over 540 million minutes streamed, over 500 million minutes, and it was in the top 10, not on Amazon, but in all of streaming, which was incredible. It's been in the top 3 on Amazon since it came out. And there were thousands of comments, many of which I was super fascinated by, and review videos and speculations and just a conversation that I wanted to be a part of. So I began to think, well, why can I not welcome you into the creation of the show itself, where we make it? So we started Inside the House. This is your way to meet the people making the show, where we could answer the questions that you have, some of which are fantastic. So that's the purpose of the show. And right here at this desk, myself, my co-showrunner Jon Gunn, had an incredible conversation with the great Stephen Lang. Check it out. The whole purpose of this after show is to respond to the conversation that the show has started. I mean, thousands of comments, people doing entire breakdowns of each episode online. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. A huge theme is your portrayal of Samuel in this show, deeply resonating with people. And I want to talk about your journey as an actor, because it's an incredible career. But Samuel specifically, what was your way into this character? And because it's a very unique portrayal of a prophet or a seer, and people are resonating with it.
Well, I was initially so fascinated by the simple fact that Samuel is revered by 3 of the world's major religions. I found that fact compelling, that he is respected and loved in Judaism, in Christianity, and in Islam. And I know that there are several other figures like that, Moses being, I think, the most prominent of them probably, but not a lot. And given the times we live in, it seems to me, with all the divisiveness that there is, with all the disagreements and all the tsuris that there is, it struck me as a wonderful opportunity to play a figure who is kind of beloved by so many diverse thinking people. So that was one. That was just an attraction to me. And then, of course, that all immediately begs the question, well, what is it about him that everybody finds so fascinating and worthy of respect? And I think that as we've explored the character together through your writing, both of your writing and my acting and the wonderful directing that we've had as well. That's the kind of question that we've been exploring. Why is Samuel as revered as he is? And so that leads us to other places. The fact that Samuel, his fate, his destiny, was manifest before he was born. His very name means request to God or asking of God. He was God's own from the very, very beginning. That to me was fascinating as well. And then the fact that he had a direct relationship with God. How could you not want to explore something as mysterious as that? But then, so all these things kind of factor in when you're reading it and you're considering whether to do the project. But then really the task becomes simply to humanize him, to make him a man that people, that people can in some fashion relate to.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that's been such a pleasure for me, because I feel like the challenge of doing this show, Samuel's on that list. Like, how do you create a version of Samuel that is human and unique and relatable and compelling to watch? And I feel like the idea of a man who's burdened in the way Samuel is, right? The gift of being connected to God also comes with spending most of your life telling people things about themselves and their destiny that might be hard to hear, but also that somebody like that would have to be such a compelling personality for so many people to follow and listen to them. Yeah. And then the charm and charisma and humanity of a man like that would have to exist. And so it's been a real pleasure, just for me personally, from the moment that you arrived, to see the way in which you imbued humanity and levity and vulnerability within Samuel. So there's moments, and it's my favorite kind of humor, is the unexpected laugh in a serious moment, right? And I just think that I never know exactly what you're going to do with a moment, but there's always truth in it. And so it's such a pleasure to watch when we're on set, and it's an incredible pleasure to watch on the screen.
That's very, very kind of you to say, and I'm glad you feel that way. But one of the things that makes me think of is how surprising this role has been to me, because the levity, the good humor, the kind of the warmth that you're, I think, referring to, it was not planned, really. It comes as a result of the relationships that one has on screen, it seems to me. And so I talk about, just briefly, just mention the affection that Samuel feels for Saul, which is not an easy affection at all. That is a fraught relationship, and I think always has been. But it's all the deeper for being fraught, it seems to me. It's all the more committed and loving. He's been guiding Saul for many, many years at this point. He's deeply, deeply invested in Saul. And so the feelings of affection that I just immediately felt for an actor of Ali Suleiman's is his character and depth that he brings to it.
Take us into one scene, because when you talk about that, speaking of the truth, one of the scenes, there were several moments, having wanted to do this project for many, many years, or the story, there's several moments that I really wanted to try to get right. One of those is Samuel's confrontation to Saul, delivering the words of God. A topic in a sermon, to obey is better than sacrifice, is one of those things that's often used. So it kind of plays out like Shakespeare in the Bible. I mean, it's a famous speech. And I had never seen a version on film or television that I felt did the moment justice. So, that's one of those moments in the show where you're basically delivering almost verbatim the Bible itself. And yet, what people may not understand is, as an actor, you have to come in with a certain perspective and take. And I thought your take of basically almost like a parent confronting a child that is, an addict that needs to move out, was such an interesting choice. Can you talk about how you decided upon that take and then how you delivered it? Because I feel that that's the first time I had seen that moment really believable and Bible and truly powerful. We shot it with 5 cameras, and it was, I remember watching it almost like I was watching a spectacular play.
I think that if you combine the righteous indignation that is clearly Samuel feels at, with the news that he has to deliver, with the situation that he is walking into in the scene you're talking about, if you combine that sort of, that righteous indignation with the compassion that he just invariably feels for Saul, I think that that's a formula for something kind of interesting. What I found so moving about that scene was Saul's desire for privacy. That's such a human thing.
Yeah, can we please step outside?
He was saying, please, because he can see the minute I walk. He's seen this look before. The minute I walk, he knows he's done bad.
Yeah.
It's like the parents coming home early and like a party gone wrong. That shot, one of my favorite shots in the
drunk
series,
on the floor
of you at the door. But it really is compassion met with power, which is the character, you know.
And he comes in loaded for bear.
Yeah.
Really loaded for bear. And as you recall, Saul sort of starts out with that kind of Saul bravado. Welcome, Samuel. Blah, 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 blah. And
Yeah, we can make everything okay.
We're
here,
not
right?
going to, and I say, we're not going to do that. You tell me, things are great. How come I hear the cattle? How come I hear how come there's filth in the room like that? And then he backs up Loretta real quick. You know what I mean? And says. Could we discuss this in private?
Please don't humiliate me in front of
everyone. Kind of a mini moment for Samuel that he doesn't just eviscerate him
Right. There's compassion.
He grants it.
publicly.
There is compassion.
He grants it. Why does he grant it? Because he loves him, and because he's a good dude. He's a good guy.
And by the way, that love leads to a particular kind of frustration that I think comes out in that scene. Like, why, when you knew this is what you were meant to do, did you not obey? And I think that's a very relatable parent-child thing to have happen when you're like, I specifically told you, and you promised you would be home by 10. You promised you would do the thing we talked about. Why would you not do the thing?
But
that you
it's
knew you needed
wonderful
to do?
that you say, the example you're using is you promised you'd be home by 10. Although in this case, you promised you'd annihilate the Amalekites, man, woman, child, all their crops, all their livestock, everything. That's what you're supposed to do. And in that, and as a 21st century human being, we look at this, and we can understand totally why Saul would say, "We're not going to kill the children, and I'm going to distribute the livestock and the crops to all my people who worked so hard, who fought so hard on my behalf." It's actually a very, very sensible thing to do. Unfortunately, it is not what himself has ordered, and in that sense, Samuel is a fundamentalist, by trade. There.
But also, I think that's a big part of what our job is to take the context of that and say, what is the relatable version of that? And regardless of what he did, the point was he disobeyed, and he knew the stakes and the price of disobeying. And as a parent looking to their child to say, I specifically told you this, and you disobeyed, and now I'm frustrated. This is a very, for me, relatable parent experience. I have to punish you now, and I wish I didn't have to because I love you.
And what is the thing that he really starts with, and he repeats it, I think, either twice, but maybe 3 times, to the glory of Saul.
Yeah.
The glory of Saul.
Right.
This is what I saw. And
That's the underlying problem.
But it's absolutely unforgivable. Yeah. You give credit where it's due, and it's only due in one place. You know
same
what
thing
I mean?
later when Saul says, I built a nation and you said, you built a nation. That you're making it about yourself. Like, how many times do I have to remind you this message?
And so when you confront Saul in the tent, because I remember that day that we filmed the scene, and you're like, I have a take on this. And it made me say, and it just illuminates the material all over again.
I understand this is the Old Testament. I understand this is Saul and Samuel, but also it's 2 human beings, and our job is to take this remarkable story and to make it accessible to to everyone who wants to see it. I don't know if that answers.
And by the way, I remember
question.
this. By the way, just interesting fact. This was the very first scene we shot with you. It's the first thing you ever did for the show. So I do remember sitting down and talking about. I think we even talked about it being more than a parent confronting a child, but like an intervention almost.
An intervention that came up. We did talk. That
idea that like this is you've crossed a line, and there's this is the hard conversation where I'm telling you, no matter how much you beg or plead, you are no longer living in this house. And so he's made the mistake that there is no coming back from, and you're just here to deliver that hard news.
Exactly.
And that's way more challenging than just a parent reprimanding a child. And so the stakes of that were very large, but also the stakes for all of us, because it was such an important scene and it was the first one up to shoot.
And when people, when we do interviews and they ask about the themes and what's relatable and everything, well, I mean, is there anything... And we always talk about David, about the self-actualization of David, and that's a major theme of this show. But Saul, also, the wayward child, as it were. Everyone, I think, can see either themselves or someone that they're intimately connected with, in that character's dilemma, in his pain.
And the way that he lashes out as a child, one of the moments that I think is so wonderful and very vulnerable in that exchange, as you're reprimanding him as the seer with all the authority and power, and you say, I loved you like a son, and he says to you, yet your sons did not love you, which right out of the gate, first of all, is such a gut punch. He knows the pain that you feel as a father who feels like he's failed with his own sons. It gives such a vulnerability to Samuel, but also it's so that idea of a child lashing out at their parent when they're being reprimanded, is so sort of such a universal and true thing as well. I love that moment because I remember you just sort of look down at that as like, oh,
that's
man,
one of my favorite shots.
For you to come at me with that, like, is a low blow.
Well, and the idea that one of the things that I love that you play is that Samuel, this powerful character, which we'll get to, this formidable character, also this compassionate character. What Saul says to him is, you say, I loved you like a son. He says, yet your sons did not love you. Is that not why Israel demanded a king? So the idea that Samuel was a father, had no father figure in his life, and his sons, didn't follow in his ways. So what I love that you play is the idea that at some level he would have carried responsibility or the questions of, maybe this is all my fault, like this whole king thing, and you carry that weight in an interesting way throughout the show.
So those are some of the vulnerable qualities that I think contribute to making the character such a joy, such a complex kind of joy, and a simple joy for me to play, as well as the guilt. The pain of never having had really a relationship with my mother at all, and certainly none with Elkanah, my father, particularly. It's a trade-off because the life that he lives is absolutely singular. There's no life like that at all. And I think that it's not unusual for the sons of, I would say under other circumstances, saints, let's say venerated men and women, for their offspring to be completely unable and unwilling to live up to the standard that they feel is being set. I mean, the fact that Joel and I want to say I can't remember my son's name. No wonder they hate me.
I think if you surveyed,
no, I do know them, but
scholars, they wouldn't know.
The fact that they are corrupt, which is what they are, is basically a mere reflection of my own, quote, master Eli's sons, who also were corrupt. It's just because one is touched by the Lord and one has a sense and mission of righteousness is no guarantee that is going to be passed on.
And by the way, that's also a big theme of the show, which is the cost of destiny, right? And the idea that there's a price to pay very often for people who are anointed in various ways in life. Like and sometimes the price of that comes at the expense of the loved ones.
It does in this case. Of course, you did something that I think was a very smart thing to do, and I'm so pleased you did it. You mentioned his wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Hilla played such a beautiful job, such a sympathetic and warm thing. And I've thought about that relationship, and certainly in terms of the sons. Like, so we were married, and we have this incredibly warm and close relationship, and yet the sons are not part of it. And I'll tell you who it always makes me think of is Ronald and Nancy Reagan, who you know seem to have eyes only for each other, possibly at the expense of their family. You know, I just don't know how much room being so devoted, so responsible to you know Adonai. I don't know how much room that actually leaves for Samuel to be, you know, the father, the loving father that's necessary. He can be the righteous judge, and he was. He's the last and possibly the most profound of the judges of Israel. But that's different. You know what I mean? That's very different than being dad.
And you also didn't have a role model, right? Which is something that is an interesting thing. You can be a seer ordained by God, but also not have the life experience to be a good father.
I want to get into your story as an actor, but one of the things in that I notice in terms of the craftsmanship of the performance, I think it was Sorkin that said dialogue. Some people say dialogue is like music. He thinks dialogue is music. You find, like, I find myself just kind of mesmerized by the rhythm you bring to the dialogue and the cadence of his words and the. What is the craftsmanship behind the way you sing the song, basically?
Well, I think it probably has a lot to do with Shakespeare and with poetry, both of which I've been, you know, doing and reading aloud for so many years. You know, I basically recite the Gettysburg Address every day. I've done it daily. I do it as a memory. I enjoy reading words. I enjoy the flow of words. I enjoy stringing them together in ways that are pleasing to speak and to hear. Remember, I was watching Chris Walken, who, you know, I just adore Chris, talking about acting, and he was talking about, because Chris has a very sort of particular meter of speaking in many ways, he was talking about the flow of words, just massaging them and getting them right. I feel I'm the same way.
There's a trap, I think, that's very easy to fall into, where you're given words and you're just meant to say them, and it kind of seems obvious how you're supposed to say them. And I love how often you say these lines in a way that is not what I would expect, and that has revelation or discovery in the flow of it, or just an unexpected truth or rhythm, you know, because when we talk, we don't tend to talk perfectly. We don't always know the end of the sentence when we start, you know. And so I love the sound of you saying lines.
That's what. Thank you. I think that it gets back to when we were speaking before about surprise. Every role is different. Every approach that you take to every role has got to be different, it seems to me. Every time you act a role, you must rediscover the entire process of acting. And at some point, you must acknowledge the fact that you don't know nothing about nothing. And there's absolutely no way you can succeed in this part. If you do that, you're going to probably come out okay. So what does that mean? It means knowing your words so well that you can forget them and rediscover. And that's one of the keys to Shakespeare, of course, is knowing that, because, you know, that can kill you. I've never explored a character like this before. The frailties, you know, we talk about his strength a lot. The frailties and the vulnerabilities of this character are truly what really grabbed me, because I'm getting older. And to play a character who is really, because you remember, he's in the twilight of his career here. You know, he's accomplished a great deal already, and he knows that the end is kind of in sight. And this is a completely new thing for me to play, because I've been young all my life. And now I don't mind being old. I just want to stay old for a really long time.
It is true, though, to see the fear in Samuel, the moments that I've been really moved by, where, you know, when I don't want to give any spoilers, but, like, you know, you have fear for your wife's life, you know, and to see Samuel, and you think very often of a prophet or a seer, you know, with such a connection to God, being sort of steadfast and always strong and confident, and to see the real human fear and vulnerability of, like, my loved one is at risk, or my life could be in danger. there's truth to that even for a prophet.
Yes.
You know, and those moments really move me because it just dimensionalizes a character like that. You know.
Yeah. Well, you know, the way things are told in the Old Testament, they are told in such kind of vivid black and white terms. You know, it's important stuff for sure. But there's a two-dimensionality to it in my estimation. And so what you've done very cannily, it seems to me, is you've just added a whole depth of another dimension.
But you know what's interesting when the Bible says like Samuel wept all night for Saul?
Yeah.
Like that is an interesting statement. To weep for someone, there is an
all
emotional,
night, yeah.
Right.
all night. And what I loved about that was allowing Gila to be the person that receives you on the other side of being up all night weeping with your hair down and messy. Like those moments are really interesting reminders of what it looks like for somebody to actually weep all night. That's a sentence on a page. But what does that look like when someone comes home having wept all night for a person they love and mourning that person?
Yeah, that's actually probably my favorite moment that I've seen in the show thus far is when I am coming home, making my way back to our place, and Gila comes out, and what does she do? She looks at me and she says, "Oh, your hair."
Your hair.
I love that
Me too, because it's all down and
because you know there's a vanity to him as well, which we also played when we got to Jesse's house, and I talk about the olive oil and the hair, and everything. And I thought, and again, that's something that was a complete surprise to me. But we know, since he's a Nazarite, that not cutting the hair is essential. It's a core value representing something to him. So there's no reason on earth why we shouldn't play with it, and there's no reason on earth why he shouldn't be or wouldn't be somewhat vain about it.
And also, by the
why
way,
his wife wouldn't be like, this is a lot of work.
Yeah, also just the routine of it. You have to take care of hair that's that long. And so that means braiding makes sense. So that becomes a job that someone has to do. Yeah. And when you have a loving wife who says, bring it over, let me do this for you, that just humanizes you in such a wonderful way. And those are the gifts that I think come when everybody's bringing their heart and soul to a project.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't a scripted idea, it was something you just thought of.
It was great fun, too. It's just great fun to do that, to explore. It's what makes this character so unique. And I know I've said it 3 times. I'll just say it again. He continually surprises me. And we're not done yet, you know? I mean, he's certainly he's old and he's not going to last forever, I know. But I'll be very curious to see
what... There's some extraordinary things to come. In terms of belief, your mother was Catholic and your father Jewish.
Yes.
How did that shape your how did belief emerge for you in that? It's a fascinating way to grow up.
Well, my parents were both New Yorkers. And also, you know, my mother came from Brooklyn, Irish Catholic. My father from Manhattan, Hungarian Jew. What we would say in New York is, you know the difference between a Catholic and a Jew. Jews are born guilty. Catholics have to go to school to learn it. That's the only real difference. You know. But it was never first of all, my family, we were not particularly religious, although I was bar mitzvahed and went to Hebrew school. It was a Reform temple. We were not heavily religious in that sense, and we also celebrated Christmas. We had a Christmas tree as well. So you kind of got the best of both worlds as well. And this was not a terribly unusual thing, certainly in the environs of New York, which is a very pretty polyglot place in many ways. So it worked out pretty well. It also gave me access to several heritages. I mean, believe me, we could be doing, the life of St. Patrick, and I'd be delighted to be part of that as well, because that part of the Irish part of my heritage is something that I absolutely love, and I had a grandmother, my nanny she was as Irish as they come, and she'd say, "Oh, you're one of us, you're one of us." My faith is is not the same, I think, as many people who are deeply, deeply enmeshed in religion. My faith is based on social responsibility, on the ethic. I believe in the ethic of Judaism very, very much. But again, and that contributes to kind of where we started with this thing, the fact that Samuel is revered in a number of religions. I think that someone who is kind of a bit of a mongrel,
Yes,
if it's okay to say that, in terms of religion, maybe it's okay for me to play that. I think it's a question of having respect and reverence for all.
Just two more questions for me. What we've had an iconic film career as well as a career on stage. You think Avatar, obviously, and finding the humanity as the movies go. I know you can't give spoilers there, but also you think Tombstone, you think Gettysburg, Gods and Generals. I mean, just on and on. So what is acting to you? Like, what's the joy of it? What's the burden of it? What brings you back again and again to have such a career?
I think it's a calling. I really do think that acting, in a sense, it is like the priesthood in that respect. I think acting is a calling, which doesn't mean that one is called to be a great actor or even a good actor. I think probably what it has to do with is telling stories. One of the things, when I speak sometimes to actors or at a graduation or something like that, a line I always like to kind of stick in there at the end is, what is it people need? I'll tell you, people need bread, and they need salt, and they need fire, and they need stories. Stories are absolutely crucial to our location in time. They illuminate both our past and our future, and they warm our present, it seems to me, around the campfire, things like that. So to be a storyteller, to be the one who actually, interprets and enacts stories that far more imaginative people than I, can kind of come up with, that seems to me to be a very worthy thing to do with one's life. And I've just always loved doing it. When they ask about acting, you can get very esoteric about it. You can talk about all kinds of things. It's a sense of pretend. It's a deeply held sense of pretend that we are willing to, and it is actually a form of possession, voluntary possession that one goes into. For me, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with me being uncomfortable with myself and wanting to be someone else, because I don't really know who I am. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Give it time. Maybe one day.
I'll discover it on my...
You'll finally go, I figured it out.
But is the exploration of these characters, does that illuminate, do you discover more about oneself by exploring other people?
I sure think you do. I do. I mean, I just uncover facets of yourself that you may not have been all that aware of. Why is it that one will spontaneously break into tears? So many of the characters I play, I think of them as, you're kind of illuminating corners of the soul, of one's own soul, that we don't normally go to, because we don't need to go to them, and we don't think, we're not, you know what I mean? We're not sort of conscious that it's there. We're not aware that it's even there to be gone to. But when you play a character who is radically different from the experience I have growing up, things happen. They just happen, and they happen courtesy of great directing, great writing, and I'd say even most importantly, the relationships that one forms with other actors as one is actually doing a scene. That's where you're really that's why being there, we were talking about being in the moment. That's what that's about.
Finally, because I could go on and on and on with this conversation. It's a great. I love a great conversation. So a scene that many, many, many people love is the anointing of David. Beautiful. Take us there. What was it like to film that? What are your memories of it? Very special moment in the show.
The circumstances of filming that were extraordinarily conducive to good work. We were in a beautiful place, and if you recall, the evening was a beautiful, beautiful evening. You were waiting for magic hour. Much of the day we worked hard. It was a warm day, but not a killingly hot day. I remember that the group of actors we had, starting with Louis playing Jesse, who does just a marvelous job to me. But the sons lined up that way.
Yeah.
As a father, I mean, it's just very moving.
It was very moving
to see the expectation and the fear that these young men had, to realize the power that they endow me with, you know what I mean, by their respect and everything like that. That was really amazing. And then to have this young fella come loping up. Remember, he kind of came tearing up there and everything like that.
Such a great moment. Where is David? And then you turn, and here he is running up the hill, this boy.
And so the circumstances that you created, that production created, were, as I say, very conducive to kind of a good things happening. It seems to me. It's interesting now that we're on a sound stage here. But I was just suggesting, well, what if we did that scene in here? Yeah. Well, we'd find a way. You'd find that doorway in that made it every bit as compelling, every bit as emotional.
But I will say that's one of the gifts that we try to give ourselves, right? Is this, like, if you can be in a real space with real people, with real circumstances as much as possible. We have fought very hard, as we say, to inconvenience ourselves to go to the places where you can, a lot of actors have said that. There have been wonderful scenes in the show where there's just crowds of people and we've just got cameras out of the way and just let you live in the moment for a 9 or 10 minute take, And as an actor, I think that's a real gift, because the tangible things that you feel, the air blowing, like we're out in the dirt and in the earth and the land, and you feel the heat. And I love the fact that our production designer, Chad, has done an incredible job, and that whole team has built us our sets on the land, out on the hillside. So you drive and you hike and you go, so that even when you're interior at a house, the windows have the real air blowing through it, and it just feels different.
What, I think probably selfish question, because it's something I'm truly fascinated by you. You just have this rich inner life. Is that cultivated? Is it caught or taught? Is that something someone can develop? Like, what's your process of just having either a perpetual curiosity or being a student of life itself, or just having a rich inner life? I think is something I find fascinating about you that shows up on screen.
I've been fortunate that I've been surrounded by people who have enriched my life, have given me so much in the way of guidance and culture, opportunity, whether it be, and in all aspects of life, whether it be literature and art or music, or, cooking, which is a hugely important thing in my family and many, many families. Just to be enlightened and to be kind of included and instructed by people who have the skills. That enriches one's own inner life, and I think it pushes you in the direction of wanting to enrich others' lives as well. I love being surrounded by young actors. I absolutely, not because they're respectful to me, which is great. I'm delighted that they're happy to have me there. It's their energy. I learn from them. They are the ones who kind of fill me, make me get through the day, and they make me want to be better because they think something of me. So I want to earn that kind of respect. But I would end this answer by saying, as there's a quote from T.S. Eliot, and he's defining poetry, and he says, what is it? What we are trying to achieve is a state of complete and utter simplicity, costing not less than everything. And that, to me, is a pretty fair definition of the acting process in the most kind of general terms. I have to go down all kinds of alleys, but what I really want to do, by the time I finally, hang up my my dance belt or whatever it is, I would like to have achieved kind of a state of real just simplicity in my work. I think when I started out for years, I was very, very ornate. actor. I love a lot of curly cues. I still do.
Yeah.
I still do now and then. But simplifying is a good thing to do, And I think that makes for clarity. That gives one a richness in a way.
And simplicity is not easy.
Costing not less than everything.
Exactly.
That's right.
That's what I love about the back half of that quote.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Well, look, your portrayal of Samuel is, to me, iconic. As a great fan of the material itself, I think like there is, a prophet, a seer in all sides of the character, and your dedication, and just the working relationship. It's such a symphony of art what we do, and it's so the thing ends up being infused. It's a the people that you make something with is just it's so cool how it's like jazz. So we're grateful for you being in our show, man.
I would also just close personally by saying that another thing T.S. Eliot wrote is, in my beginning is my end. And my very beginning with this show was a conversation that the three of us had via Zoom, where I was... I remember I was kind of there with my arms folded. It's like, okay, what is it you fellows are doing now? And we had a great discussion.
We did. I loved it.
About all life values, just a wide-ranging, wonderful conversation.
It was all about knowing each other and being kind of endowed with the confidence in each other that we would want to work together. And here we are, a year later, just roughly a year later, having the same conversation.
I remember hanging up from that Zoom and going, man, I hope he says yes. I hope we said the right stuff so that he says yes.
And we're glad you did.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
And I can't wait for, this is an after show midway through the season. There's 3 scenes in episode 7 and 8, one in particular in 7 that are my favorite scene in the whole series, that between you and Jesse. No spoilers. I can't wait for the audience to see them. But yeah, I love the show. I'm grateful certainly for the success for the audience, and I'm glad people love your portrayal, and working with you is a pleasure, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me aboard.
Thank you.
Really,
Thank
it's
you.
great to be here. Yeah. Very good.